and at least we can do it that way. And if it's a Facebook problem, perhaps, then we will just have to deal with that, and we'll go ahead and run the event here and then post it as a watch party on Facebook afterwards, which everyone can then share, which will also still be seen by tons of people. So let's go ahead and do it that way. I have just hit recording, everyone, so heads up, we are recording. Hello, everyone. My name is David Estrin. I am the founder and CEO of Together We Remember, a nonprofit and emerging movement to empower the next generation of leaders to make never again a reality by transforming remembrance into action. Every year during the month of April, which is Genocide Awareness Month, we organize collective memory projects to bring people together across lines of difference and affirm that promise of never again, once and for all. I'm thrilled to share that over the past 30 days, we've been organizing virtual events all across the country, and now, as of midnight tonight, all over the world. Starting at midnight, we are hosting a global virtual 24-hour vigil to unite the fight against hate worldwide. We've got events literally in 20 plus countries with over 50 organizations coming together, but that's happening at midnight. Right now, we're still going to throw down with one of our awesome virtual programs, the first ever Together Remember virtual poetry open mic. We've got incredible youthful creatives who are going to be sharing their art with you this evening. So without further ado, I want to pass it off to Emily Morey, who was one of the architects who came up with this idea just a few weeks ago, and here we are with folks all across the country sharing their art with you. So Emily, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning into our event. My name's Emily. I'm from the Pittsburgh area, and I got to lead this event thanks to the Together We Remember Youth Action Network. The Youth Action Network helps bring together youth across the country to share their voice and take a leadership role in the act of remembrance. And I personally wanted to create a poetry event because, I know myself personally am not skilled at the visual arts, and I know how impactful poetry can be for someone to write and for someone to listen to. And tonight we're going to listen to 8 wonderful poets that were brave enough to submit their poetry to share with you guys. So we will go through the poetry first. So each poet will introduce themselves before they read their poetry, and afterwards we will go through some questions that we already have in the bank, and then we also have a Q&A feature on Zoom that you can use to submit your questions at the end. And if the Facebook Live does work, you can also submit your questions on there so that they can come through and you can ask them. So we are going to start off with Samantha, if you want to start off with your poem.
Hello, my name is Samantha Krantz. I live in Charleston, South Carolina, and work for the Charleston Jewish Federation as the Remember Program Associate, which means that I run their Holocaust education and awareness programs in Charleston. So I'm excited to read a poem I wrote for you. It's called What Now? So what now? The Jews were gone, all 6 million of them. The kids were gone, all 1.5 million of them. The others were gone, all 5 million of them. Life stopped, a gate approaches, cattle trains, no air, no food, no hope. Darkness is nearby, with walls of silence. Hiding from your own shadow, what now? They wait as their luck diminishes. Will they survive? We must hope. What? Auschwitz-Birkenau, Belzec, Bergen-Belsen, Buchenwald, Kelno, Dachau, Majdanek, Ravensbrück, Sobibor, Theresienstadt, Treblinka. Uncertainty lies ahead as the darkness fills the sky above. Buildings built with hate, bad intentions, and the will to kill. The air turned to ash, black fire consumed all. The streets left empty with dreams to live. Of those murdered, taken within a blink of an eye. The survivors, as the days drag on without family or friends, what next? For now, you can hope. You can dream of a future without this darkness. And so it continues, 75 years later. Commemorations happen around the world. Liberation from the darkest places the world has ever seen. The lies, the accusations still showing its dark colors in everyday life. A new country, home of the free, America. And it still continues, 75 years later. The hate that defies logic, deniers that say it never happened, but the trail of destruction still remains. Our survivors have seen it all before, over and over again. We prevail and come out stronger than before. Our survivors leading the way, sharing the unimaginable nightmares they have seen before. As their footprints fade away on Earth, our voices get louder. As we share their story, La Dorva. And today we remember, we weep, thinking about all of the lives taken too soon. For the lost generations, shot, gassed, and trapped. We remember, we weep. We turn remembrance into action. The world is our canvas, and our survivors continue to be our inspiration. For a new world filled only with love, we can only imagine. Thank you.
I get some snaps for Samantha. Awesome, y'all. Thank you, Samantha.
Yep. So our next poet to read his poem is going to be Alex. So if you want.
Hi, I'm Alex, and I am currently the communications coordinator for Vigo County's in Indiana's safety initiative. That's all ran by youth, and I'm a junior at Indiana State. And I'm here to share my poem called Never Again, Trans Edition. Someone once asked me what it was like to walk down the street by myself, and before I cut off my hair, it made sense that men would catcall me as if I were the only object that would be satisfying. It made sense because that's what was supposed to happen. And then I got to college, cut my hair off, and started to make over my closet. And maybe this is what it is to remember: the safety and security before leaving the closet behind, even if you make it over. Because each day there is a new opportunity for your body to lay in an alleyway bleeding out and first responders aren't called. Because this is what it means to be transgender in 2020. This is what it means to remember that Marsha P. Johnson is who we look to. This is what it means to remember trans women were on the battle lines before we even knew our own names. They were behind the scenes writing the scripts, the narratives that live on today. But somehow walking down the street is still so hard. I remember the moment I knew I was back in the closet because it was a simple question. What pronouns do you prefer? And suddenly my world came crashing down. But what is it like to know your name is who you were destined to be? Do we remember the names that were supposed to be instead of the names that were given to us as if they were a burden? Because Emily was becoming Ethan, because Caitlin was becoming Alexander, because she became Kit, because they became Rocky. Because in the womb they thought this was who we were, and yet the world allows our sisters to bleed on the sidewalk. The world allows our graves to be written without the names we were supposed to be given. Our tombstones are burdensome. And we still cannot walk down the streets because we choose to turn a blind eye to the reality of never again for our trans family. If never again were a reality, then the script would be written. Bricks would not have to be thrown. Doctors wouldn't deny us. Politicians wouldn't try to rewrite our narratives. We wouldn't be shot in the streets. Our brothers wouldn't walk with a slouch, wondering when their spines would allow them to rise again. Our sisters wouldn't be fetishized. Our non-binary siblings wouldn't wonder when their pronouns would be acknowledged. Never again for our trans family seems to be so far away, but if we say their names, Dustin Parker, Monica Diamond, Paris Cameron, Brooklyn Lindsay, Sasha Wall, if we say their names, maybe we will hear them calling out in the dead of night, crying, never again will we be silenced, because we are here and we won't go anywhere. You can try to erase us, but please just let us walk down the streets in peace. Thank you.
That was really good, Alex. Thank you. Our next poet is Hana.
Hello, my name is Hana. I am a sophomore at Montour High School in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I wrote this poem two years ago. Not sure how it's gonna sound. It's called Hatred. Hatred. He comes from within us, whose hearts have been destroyed. He travels through our veins. He travels up our brains. He shoots out from inside of us and spreads into the hearts of our friends. He whispers in our ear, let pure hatred ascend. We try so hard to set ourselves free from his chains that can't simply let us be. His fiends fly through us and transform us until we become one of them. Together we fly with pure hatred and fury through the souls of innocent ones until we conquer the world, leaving no trace of happiness.
Thank you for that, Sahana. That was really amazing. And now for our next poet, Doreen. Oh, Doreen, you're on mute.
Sorry. So, hi, my name is Doreen Hansis, and I'm Indiana State Stand Advocate, which is the student-led movement to end mass atrocities. And I'm also part of Together We Remember's youth initiative. And I wrote this poem. I tailored it from my Together We Remember's Never Again pledge, so it's sort of a narrative poem. It's called My Promise. I was asked what never again means to me. Me, a 16-year-old girl, with a limited view of the present and a complicated one of the past. I wanted to come up with an answer so articulate and thoughtful it could embody this goal and movement we have created. I wanted my answer to explain the way I felt when I stood on the desecrated barracks in Auschwitz, felt the dirt of a mass grave in Poland, or when I was too young to understand why the Holocaust survivor on television cried about the tragedy in Darfur. Later I realized she wept because it had happened, again. The vicious cycle of hate, separation, and violence. How could I find an answer that explained my need to halt this cycle? Should I include the testimonies and wishes of my elders who built the movement we continue to grow? Or should I encapsulate the youth movement's vendetta against hate and discrimination? I struggled. I stretched and I wrote and wrote. My personal experiences, my goals, and the horrors I've seen unfold in my short lifetime. Still, never again always seemed to come down to one final idea. Promise. A promise to myself, to the future generations, and the past to continue this legacy. When we joined Together Remember, we shared our promises. Some promised to work hard, others promised to educate the public, and we all promised to remember those lost to mass genocides. This is what Never Again really is. It is people of every color, nationality, religion, sexuality, sex, age, and creed. It is us, together, making a promise. Putting aside our personal agendas and beliefs. Carrying this torch to light lamp after lamp after lamp. And making enough progress to pass it off to the next generation, to make their own promises and light their own path forwards to end this cycle. This is the spirit of Never Again. I have found my answer. Now you must promise to find yours.
Thank you, Doreen. And our next poet is going to be Ava.
Hi, I'm Ava. I'm a freshman at Harvard Westlake School in Los Angeles, and I'm a part of the Los Angeles Museum of the Holocaust Teen Board and the Together We Remember Youth Action Network. And my poem is called Battering a Wall. Run your hands along the gritty wall, feeling for even one loose brick. Something to shove, a peephole. The names, they're hiding, the endless, ongoing names. What we say ended then, continues today. And what we say won't repeat, happens tomorrow. Behind the stones are the victims of the hate, the guns, the hands, the words, of those who believe that to make up for what they lack, they must deprive another. Each and every day that passes, where not one whisper of a name escapes, is yet another victory for faceless perpetrators. Yet each and every name uttered removes a single brick. A peephole becomes a gaping void in the existence of hate. The names of the victims float among us, like the free beings they once were before poisoned by the hate that percolates within our atmosphere.
Thank you, Ava. Now, Cassidy is going to read a poem.
Hi, I'm Cassidy. I am from Pittsburgh, and I'm going to be reading a poem that my friend wrote but chose to stay anonymous. Never again. Never again means we stop the vicious cycles of violence that plagues us. It means that we don't let hatred become our reality. Never again is not letting tragedy define us, but using it to fuel our passion for rebuilding a broken world. It means we can't forget. We can never forget, but we can grow. We can allow ourselves to move forward and do better. We have to do better, so that never again becomes the truth, our truth. So together, let's stand and say never again.
Thank you, Cassidy. And our next poet is going to be Naya.
Yola, y'all. My name is Naya Vanterpool. I am living in Washington, D.C., though I wanted to say a Baltimorean because that's the place I just recently moved from. I'm going to be reading a poem titled The Call. The reason I chose this poem is because I wrote it 10 years ago when I was a sophomore in college, and I was really reflecting on how the thing that we have to do to march forward is do something drastically different, and a courageous belief that we can change the way that things are. So this is The Call. Indeed, there thrives great resentment. When I contemplate the cemented past and how it's created our lamented present, but understand, the gifts we have inherited are ones I never want to give. But so long as the days continue to go along the lines of the status quo, I have no doubt these gifts will forever live. And these will be the worst gifts I will ever have the displeasure to give, and so bestowed with a bright ribbon and bow unto the lives of my yet unborn kids. So where do we go, and what do we have to show for our stained transgressions? And how do we know our new directions without a guiding light? How do we make corrections to our wrongs without a thought towards what is right? Let's keep our minds sharply educated, our decisions legislated, our souls deeply meditated, and be ever aware that it's not destiny that made this. The planet's plight and our own isn't fated. We create it. So beware your own strength, because you have the power to change it for better or for worse. Let us now commit to a legacy that will be a blessing rather than continuing this curse. Be something of more worth than our own vanity, giving birth to an earth freed from the insanity of people's inhumanity, and believe the man in me, because the answer might be found in Christianity, Islamic, or Buddhist beliefs, but it was man's hands, no God's, that long ago forgot the word peace. Releasing logic to money, man became compassion's thief. So I find it appropriately so that we must be the passionate relief. So cease these inhibitions telling us that life is unfair, because those scapegoated words so often repeated, I can no longer stand to bear. Here's a prayer. I pray we leave behind our silent repentance, our folded hands and their good intentions. Those are just pretenses. You and I are far from defenseless. Let not our hate be so incessant. I pray we dispense this fallacy. Pray to recognize the reality, the natural actuality that action is how we'll all be delivered from self-destruction, and thereby our own bodies able to begin the reconstruction, to recapture our humanity from this eternal lost and found. Because to no single destiny are we definitely bound. I pray our movements be profound and we eternally stay, a union deeply vowed to the discovery of a day that we can be a people truly proud, fully capable of saying that this is our humanity. Now, amen, and enough delaying. In God I trust, but I'm so tired of just praying. It's time to rise and start generating this world I've been conveying. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Naya. And our last poet to read tonight is going to be Anaya.
Hi guys, I'm Anaya. I am a junior at Baltimore City College, and I'm one of Baltimore's youth poet ambassadors, as well as on the youth poetry team. And I'm also an activist in all social justice reform, and I'm part of a few organizations that's too much to list right now, but I am part of a bunch of organizations. So the poem that I will be reading is called Weaponry. Got bullet shells in between my teeth, gunpowder clogged in my throat. I cough up dead bodies like tuberculosis. Bullets ricochet off my heart. I am a survivor. And I don't know what that means. When I turn the corner to see blue and red, I hope I don't return black and blue. I write poems to the melody of sirens, a way to seek beauty in the madness. When I mistake a shudder for a gunshot, I cradle myself back into fear. Remind myself that I will never be safe. I know what it is to be a girl who feels like there's all flight or no fight left in me. I know what it is to be a decaying body in a white man's world, and I've been told to have good bones. Got cracks in my foundation. She said she kept this from her children, but innocence is a foreign word to me. When Day and Moose go out of town for a shoot is when I feel most at peace. In Oakland, they got teens on target. But when cops put the red dot on their back, we pray we can keep youth alive, and ain't that ironic? But I live in Bodymore Murderland, where we body more and murder fam. Don't give a fuck if we bite the hand. We do this because we know we can. Don't know no way to live other than busting caps and running scans. Say fuck the law and the man. There will be no instance in which I stand for a flag that discriminates because I'm tan. We'd be able to succeed if they gave us the chance. But but this was a part of their plan to kill us and leave us for dead. Like damn. But this is just who I am. A girl who has oppression like a wristband. I know what it is to speak broken languages. Trauma be the first one. I'm fluent in it. You be safe out there. He's dying, she's gone. The police shot him, he's dying, he's gone, he's still dying. In translation, I love you. Now I got a switchblade in my walk. Ancestors' whiplashes engraved on my back, a dagger for a tongue. I spit out revolutions like mucus. I'll have you fall over the tripwire of your white supremacy, and ain't that a weapon of mass destruction? Thank you.
Thank you, Anaya. And now I have a couple of questions. We're going to go back around with these questions to ask the poets. The first question I have is, what is your inspiration for this poem? What is the story that inspired this poem? And we're going to start with Samantha again.
So my inspiration, I've been learning about the Holocaust since probably middle school. I've been to many of the concentration camps more than once, but really what inspires me are Holocaust survivors. I have the privilege of working with so many of them each week, and their story is what makes me want to continue, sharing as much as we can about the Holocaust, stopping future genocides, really what this future holds. And one of our Holocaust survivors, who's 96 years old, Rose Goldberg, who just passed away a month ago, I asked her, what does she want this young generation to know? And she said, we are the future. We are smart people, and we have a chance to create change. So really my poem was inspired by the words of our survivors, and taking it from when they were in the camps to now 75 years later after the World War II concentration camps, and what still lies ahead. So that's where my inspiration came from.
Thank you, Samantha. And next, Alex.
So what inspired me really was my own experience as a trans guy, and hearing from several of my friends, just like sharing news article after news article of different trans folks that have been targeted, whether it's on the streets, at home, or even in our prison systems. So that's like kind of what pushed me forward to start writing about the trans experience, and the poem came from that.
Thank you, Alex. And Sahana.
Okay. So the story that inspired my poem, it's not actually about the Holocaust or anything like that, but it could shed a light on that, because when I was writing this, I just finished a marathon of watching Harry Potter. And I was thinking about Death Eaters when I wrote this poem. And so that's basically like what I was thinking, my vision of it. But looking back on it, I could see at that point I was going through a hard time in my life. I could see how hate from other people spread to other people, then tried to like make itself known onto me, if you understand what I'm saying. But I did not let that happen. And this poem could not only stand for that, but it could also shed a light on the Holocaust and what people went through, the genocide and everything like that, and how hate can be so powerful, and why we need to stop it.
Thank you, Sahana. And Doreen, do you want to go ahead and answer that?
Yeah, I think I actually mentioned it in my promise poem. One of the things that inspired me to think about what never again meant to me was going to Auschwitz and going all across Poland. So I think that's one of the things. Never again and Together Remember to me always start with education. And when I went to Auschwitz, I was, let's say, surprised by the lack of empathy I saw with people around me. I saw just like school groups getting off the bus, and I saw people stomping around and not really looking to see what it meant. And I think that complacency is just as bad as taking part in hate. So I think Never Again begins with education. It begins with writing poems, projecting our feelings. And I think that we really need to write this poetry and get it out. So I wrote mine to think about what Never Again means to me. And at the end, I asked it other people what it meant to them. And I think that's where we really need to start, is people projecting inwards so that they can project love and acceptance outwards.
Thank you, Doreen. And Ava.
What really inspired me to write my poem is just like growing up, like Samantha, I was like interacted with a lot of Holocaust survivors. And every time I hear a survivor speak, their incredible bravery just gives me hope that we can overcome hate and mass genocide and violence. And so the survivors' stories and their courage, coupled with like the idea of the Holocaust concentration camps and the terrors that people experienced inside of them, was what inspired my poem.
Thank you, Ava. And Cassidy.
So my friend wrote out these answers before this. So she says, despite major events like the Holocaust, there are still widespread violence and prejudices going on in our world, and the only way to combat this hatred is to stand together and fight it.
Thank you, Cassidy. Naya.
Yeah, racism inspired my poems. So many of my poems. I always think that life is the most magnificent of muses, and I don't have to look too far outside of my own family to see the implications that racism has played, and how there's this stuckness that we have fighting each other over the trivialities of different cultures that we come from. My family experienced a lot of racism growing up in South Dakota, and I wanted to see and know different. I came to know a lot of Native Americans who grew up on reservations, who experienced a lot of racism and subjugation from just being a part of, but not a part of America. And then, my life was very much informed by 9/11 and all of the aftermath of that. And frankly, that was really a shift for everyone in my generation, just kind of showing how much we still needed to do to improve. race relations, but that fight is also age old. So yeah, racism has contributed to a lot of genocide, a lot of hate.
Thank you, Naya. Anaya, do you want to go ahead and give that?
Yeah. So same as now, racism, man. It was actually, I wrote this a while ago. And when I debuted it, actually debuted it at a rally with Students in Action, which is an organization I'm also a part of. And the inspiration behind me doing it at that place was we were talking about mass shootings a lot. I'm part of a lot of gun violence prevention organizations, and in most recent times, mass shootings has been the thing that they've shed light on. And they always talk about these spaces where they go in, and they kill a bunch of people, such as schools and churches and things in that situation. And I really didn't understand why it was such a figurehead of violence. I didn't understand that. And especially just because I didn't grow up in a bubble. For me, I grew up in the city. I grew up in urban areas. I know what it means to struggle with things of that nature. I know what it means to deal with racism on an everyday basis. And I know what it means to fear for your life at all times. It just being who I am, just like genetically, I just think it's fear has been inherited when it came to things like that. And so when they were talking about mass shootings, I was confused on that because I never experienced that. When I was like, you guys talk about mass shootings in schools and stuff, but we have it like in our backyard, we deal with it in urban areas all the time. It's an everyday thing for us. We have mass shootings every day in urban areas, but no one talks about it because it's just business. It's business as usual. And so I wrote this to combat that, which is why the last line is, isn't that a weapon of mass destruction? Because of that, like, we go through it every day. Like, this is nothing new for us. We're very, very much so used to it. And so it was shedding light on the fact that, like, urban violence is a violence and a genocide and a mass murders all the time. And it's just as, should be just as relevant as any other type of violence. So, yeah.
Thank you, Anaya. Those were all really, really great, thoughtful questions for the questions. Oh, okay. Answers to the first question. Yeah, there we go. So our next question that we're going to go around with is, how did you find the courage to share your poem, to share your thoughts and your feelings on a platform like this with other people watching? And we'll start with Samantha again.
So this was actually the first poem I've ever written. I've written lots of essays on the Holocaust. I've, done videos. I've talked to schools, but this was the first poem, and it was Yom HaShoah. I was sitting there watching the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum do their Days of Remembrance video, and I started thoughts. And if our survivors and victims that were killed, if they had the courage to continue living, if our survivors can continue telling their story, then we have to be their voice when they are no longer with us. And we have to continue sharing these stories to make sure that this doesn't happen again, and that we stop future genocides from happening. So I'm glad that I was able to share this today. But that's what my courage comes from.
Thank you, Samantha. Alex.
So to answer how I found the courage for this poem is actually that it took a long time for me to build up to this point. But in 2018, I started activism with a local version of March for Our Lives. And then I got involved with the NAACP and Candles Holocaust Museum. And what really pushed me was looking back and remembering how much bravery and courage that Eva Kor showed every day when she would come into the museum or when she would do her lectures and everything. She was really an inspiration in my life. And so between her and some of my mentors in the trans community, I finally found a platform where I felt safe. And also part of that goes to David. So, yeah.
Thank you, Alex. So Hana?
This poem is actually one of my my best poems that I've written, And it really felt good to get this out here on a platform like this. I wasn't really nervous or anything like that. So I don't know, like I just felt very comfortable sharing this on here. All of you are so supportive.
Thank you, Sahana. And Doreen.
I think one of the places I've always drawn courage for my writing outlets or any of my art outlets is obviously my upbringing, because it's all about the people who are around you. You know, my mother's a righteous liberal professor, so I've always just been, write this, like share your feelings. And also it comes from my need, and that also stems from my need for education. I love to educate my community and be a part of it. So I really think that people, as I said, people really need to know what never again means to them. And I also think that writing poetry and all this contributes to the idea of Together Remember and justice. And I think that to reach our goal of ending mass genocides, you have to take justice personally. So it can't just be, oh, I'll wait for somebody else to write a poem, or I'll wait for somebody else to do this because I'm not a poet, or because I'm not a good activist, or I'm not a good writer. It all begins taking these things and turning them in outwardly and inwardly.
Thank you, Doreen. And Ava.
So I think listening to people's or reading people's work and their poems has always kind of given me inspiration. And I think that when it comes to the idea of never again and stopping mass atrocities, I think in order to get more people on board with your mission and like have a greater impact, you need to inspire others. And so I wrote my poem in hopes of doing that.
Thank you, Ava. And Cassidy.
She realized that there are things that needed to be said and that we need to be the ones to speak up because no one else is going to speak up for us.
Thank you. And Naya.
Yeah, I'm going to join Doreen in her sentiment that you have to take justice personally. The powerful thing about poetry is that it's not afraid of the pain. It embraces it and it shares it with a soulful derision that oftentimes can actually elicit change. I also think that David needed some diversity and I was the old guy.
Thank you, Naya.
Very funny, Naya. Very funny.
Oh, can you hear me? Okay, cool. I didn't know if it was working. So I don't know. This poem specifically, I don't know. It's pretty old. Me just doing poetry in general though, as a kid I liked attention. I just really liked attention. And I was good at writing. So I was just like, hey, look at me, look at what I did a thing. And my mom, she supported me, and she made it seem like it was like the best poems ever, when in reality, looking back on the poems, they were trash. But it caused for growth. I think that with the more important poems, or the more poems that go out for the the social reform and things of that nature, I think it's like, the same thing. Like, you have to advocate for yourself. With like Alex said, actually a lot of it came from the organizations and the local organizations that I joined. It's funny that you said that, Alex, because I co-direct Baltimore's chapter of March for Our Lives, and a lot of my courage for that came from just the activism that I do. I always thought that it was just important. I just thought it was important to do things. I thought it was important to want your community to be a good community, and probably because I grew up in such a weird time where it was just like it was like you still could have fun, but it was just also like there was a lot of stuff going on in the world. And so I grew up in that space where everyone needed to say something or do something or be something to get things done. And so I just thought that poetry was the way to do it. For me, it was just like, and performing was the way to do it. For me, it was just like I know that the world is messed up. I know when I write these poems, I know exactly what it is. I don't need to perform it for just me. It's about other people hearing it and things of that nature. And I always just thought about I learned at a summit that I went to, it was these 3 questions. I think it was Rabbi Habel. He was like, if I'm not for myself, who will be for me? If I am for myself, who am I? And if not now, when? And those 3 questions, I go by them all the time when I do things, when I do poetry. Those are the 3 questions that I ask myself, because if I can't answer those questions, then, that poem isn't meant to be written, or that poem isn't meant to be performed. So it's always like, it's always for me is, will this positively impact my community, or will this positively impact me? And if it positively impacts at least one person, then I know that I'm supposed to be doing it, But I'm always nervous.
Thank you, Anaya. And I think it's really great that you all did find the courage to send in a poem and to share it on this platform, because any kind of art can be a reflection of somebody's soul, and as poetry especially. And I think each of you, to share a piece of yourself to everybody else, is incredible. And so for our next question that I have, it's not really a question, it's more like, what kind of advice, I'm trying, y'all, what kind of advice do you have for aspiring artists or poets or writers out there? And we'll start with Samantha.
So I went to college as a pre-med student and added Jewish studies as a double major after taking a lot of Holocaust courses. And so I always thought that I was only really good at science and math. Those were my strong suits, and writing kind of was there. I thought I was good at it. So my advice is continue writing, even if you don't think you're good. Put it out there, because your voice matters. Your words come straight from what you're thinking. So put it out there. You never know what it's going to spark. It might inspire someone. It might be what that person needs to hear that day. So I really just urge everyone to write and share your thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Samantha. And Alex.
All right, so I started writing poetry because I was asked to, and I kept writing. And I was sitting up at like 3 a.m. after going to a conference on the conflict in Syria with really wise dude that I know. And he once told us all just to like feel everything as deeply as you can. And so if you're going to write, feel it out, feel it as deeply as you can, write it out. If you don't like it, that's okay. I have plenty of poems that I am not a fan of, but like, keep writing, keep feeling it all. But also know that whenever you share these poems on whatever platform it is, be sure that you're keeping your own safety in mind, because while the world may need to hear it, it may not be the right time. Because I know for me, like if I would have written this poem 2 years ago, I wouldn't have been safe sharing it. And now that I'm in a safe space, I can share it. So keep your safety in mind. The world will hear it one day, but feel it deeply, write it out, whether it's good or not. You have all of the power of the words in your hands. And that's what I would say.
You're on mute.
Oh, thank you, Alex. So Hana, do you want to answer that question?
Well, writing has always been one of my biggest passions ever since I was like 10 years old. I began to songwrite at that time as well. It's just always been an outlet for me in everything that I've been through in life. And I know that a lot of people around this world have gone through so much worse and so many horrible things that they just need someone to speak to. They just need an outlet. And writing is very therapeutic. It's helped me a lot. And I'm sure like just all you need to do is get a pen and a paper and just write out your thoughts, write how you feel, write your heart out, so you will find peace. And it doesn't have to be good, just know that there's someone. Okay, I don't mean to be a preacher right now. Just know that there's someone, which is God, that is listening to you right now. So don't be afraid. Just get your thoughts out there. It doesn't have to be good. Your voice will be heard someday.
Thank you, Sahana. And Doreen.
I think one of the most basic things I can do to tell young people to get into poetry is write. No matter what, no matter how young you are. I think we all know that 90% of teen poetry isn't great. It's angsty, it's a little bit immature, but it gets better as you age. I remember my favorite poet was Shel Silverstein, and I thought that I was really clever. I wasn't, but I think that you need to find inspiration in other poets and in other writers, because the good has to come from somewhere, and so does the emotion. I think one of the first poets that I read was Ntozake Shange, and I read her book, For Color Girls Who Have Considered Suicide When the Rainbow Is Enough. And that's when I think that's when it clicks. So you need to find a muse, because it all has to come from somewhere. You need to find your own path, and you need to find what inspires you, and then you just need to write it down, and you write as much as you can until you can produce something that'll make people listen to you.
Thank you, Doreen. Ava.
I agree with Doreen. I think just the best advice is to just write down whatever you're thinking, like wherever you are, just write down your ideas, because even if you don't think that they have any potential, there's someone out there that will resonate with them. And so I think just wherever you are, just like write down what you're thinking and what you feel needs to be said.
Thank you, Ava. Cassidy.
Whenever you have a message, you just have to share it. Write it down, even if you're scared to speak it yourself. And then she put in quotes me right now. So that's just getting your thoughts out of your head onto paper is the most important step into saying what you think needs to be said.
Thank you, Cassidy. And Naya.
Yeah, art is just incredibly important. I think that all acts of expression are a form of art. Living is a lot like art, and putting that to practice means trusting yourself enough to speak your truth, to write your truth, whether that is your truth to yourself, your truth to the world, or your truth to a specific issue. I think it's just important that we all own our truths, speak our truths, and write our truths. So start at the truth to you and work towards that.
Thank you, Naya. And Anaya.
So I definitely agree with Niall in the sense that you have to write your truth. There's I don't know, definitely finding a muse as well. I know when I first started writing, like the first time I wrote a poem, same as Alex, I was asked to, but it became a beautiful thing. The first poet I ever listened to was Prentice Powell, a spoken word artist, and he was dope. I was just like mind blown. I felt like my life was saved when I heard that poet. And it's I think the important thing to think is that a lot of people, as a poet, a lot of people think that, I have to perform, you have to do this, you have to do that. And there's no rule, there's no boundaries for poetry. There's no boundary for truth, So at the end of the day, you just have to write your truth and know that there are no boundaries. I think, and not to get caught up in the sense that you have to write for other people. I sometimes forget that my poetry is mine. My work is mine. And if you're not doing it for yourself at first, then it will never be authentic. And I think the best thing to do is to make sure you want to stay authentic. For me, that was a struggle because I thought my poetry was for other people. I thought I had to write for other people. Or I had to write what I thought was, socially acceptable. And there's no socially acceptable way to be truthful. Or to be authentic. And so you just have to do what you want, just write, man. And just writing is not as easy as we're all making it sound. It's hard, but it's a healing process, as well as I think it was Hana that said it is healing, it is therapeutic. That's really why I started writing in the beginning, because it was very therapeutic for me. I think finding your purpose in writing is the first step, and then just, you know, listening to other poets or reading other poets, finding inspiration, finding what you want your voice to be, and then going from there. You know, just find out your purpose. Like, why are you writing? Why do you want to be a poet, or why do you want to write, or why do you want to be a writer, or what are you writing for? And then once you have that foundation built, then everything else is just a walk in the park, man. Just write.
All right, thank you, Anaya. And it's getting a little late, so we have one more question. It's a two-parter. It's from Slangston Hughes. How can poetry best serve us during the pandemic, and how can poetry best connect when we are unable to physically? And we'll start with Samantha.
So during this pandemic, we've found ourselves a lot inside and trying to find things. It gives you the time that you might not have if you are living your normal crazy life of going a million places, you know. So it gives you that time to really sit down and think about what is happening in this world, and, you know, put it down on a piece of paper or type it out. So I think that is one thing during this pandemic that's given us, and we can share what's happening in this world through a poem. And then how poetry best can connect when we are unable to physically, gives us the outlet to be able to share it on our social media, share with friends and family that might not be able to see it in person if we were saying it in person. So it really gives us, during this pandemic, a whole new realm of what we can do with our work.
Thank you, Samantha. And Alex.
So as far as the pandemic goes, a lot of us write, or at least I listen to poets that write about mental health, struggling with depression, anxiety, that type of thing. And hearing someone else that you can connect to during this time, because I found more anxiety, more depression type of thing. It's more prevalent, and we're talking about it more. And so finding poems that relate to that can help us better understand what we're feeling. But like, as far as connecting with poetry, even when we can't physically, is I think the best answer to that I have is actually the quote that I have at the top of my website that has all my poems, and it says, "Poetry is a clear expression of mixed feelings." So like I said, a lot of us are feeling a lot of mixed feelings in all of this, but poetry can express that clearly, because poetry doesn't always have to be a clear statement, cut and dry kind of essay style. You can write it, and it can be a mixed bag of everything.
Thank you, Alex. And Hana.
Well, during this pandemic, I know that either like half of us are like really depressed that we can't go outside and see our friends and everything. So I know that the one way to connect is poetry, that we could write about how we feel of being trapped inside our own homes and not being able to connect with people out there that really care about us. And I think Samantha said, it's a great way to sit down. Like, it gives you plenty of time to think about what's happening in the world, and just like start writing about what you think should change and how we should change it.
Thank you, Hana. And Doreen.
I think one of the most amazing things about poetry that can connect people over oceans and over states is the fact that poetry is a multi-sensory experience. We say it, we feel it. Poetry is the art of rhythm, and we all feel the rhythm. It's our heart, and it connects us so deeply. Like, right now, we have 8 poets who have never met in person, and we're coming together to make this project. And if we can do what in the future, what we're doing now, then I think we're good, and I think we can outlive this pandemic.
Thank you, Doreen. And Ava.
Well, I think this time that we're living in is like very foreign for all of us, and I think that poetry can kind of provide an outlet for you to just sort out your ideas and figure out how you yourself are responding to what's going on. And in terms of connecting to other people while we're all so separated from each other, I think when someone out there like finds an idea that connects with them that someone else wrote, or finds like an emotion in a poem, it creates a really deep connection even though they're not physically together.
Thank you, Ava. And since Cassidy is reading for a friend, we're going to go to Naya next to answer.
Yeah, I'll actually just agree and expand on what Ava was sharing. I think that poetry makes this deep connection with how we're feeling in a moment or in a time or in an age. And this pandemic is leaving me feeling very confused and unsettled, just the uncertainty of it all. And at times like these, I think people can turn to poetry to understand what they're feeling, what they're experiencing, and use that as a tool to connect better with themselves. And then if you see someone you know in a poem, share it with them. Use poem to connect across those feelings that are hard to share at times. A lot of times we don't want to be vulnerable, so we can let poetry be vulnerable on our behalf.
Thank you, Naya. And Anaya.
Yeah, these questions I'm still struggling with a bit, actually. Slangston asked them to us as in the team a little while ago, like maybe earlier in the week, if not today. So I'm still kind of struggling with that. I think for the first question is, how can poetry best serve us during the pandemic? I don't know, only because of the simple fact that for me, poetry is such an intimate thing. I'm so used to going to open mics and being like, oh, well, this is the only time I'll ever be able to hear this poem because it's intimate, you know. We, some of us record it. We do like getting it recorded sometimes, but, you know, it's not recorded a lot of the times. You know, it's an intimate feeling. It's a one time you get it and it's over. And so now this pandemic is here. And so we take these open mics and go to this virtual space. And while we are connecting, it's sort of like, I don't know, it's still weird for me, you know. I'm still struggling with the fact that, you know, I'm not connecting in the physical sense, only on this virtual sense, and it's kind of hard for me. I think my poetry is best worked on situational things. So like my poetry is situational. When things happen, I write. And so when I'm in the space of, you know, confusion and things are happening, but they're not, they sort of are, I'm in this isolation from the outside world and outside activities, it's kind of hard to get in the space to write. You know, you get this, you know, this helpless feeling of sort of like, well, when will this ever end, you know? And so the question is like, you know, what will become of poetry in the time to come, because we don't know. This is such an uncertain time. And so it kind of confuses me on the sense of like, I don't know what to do if not, you know, write to perform, you know? And how can poetry best connect when we're unable to physically? That's also a thing that I'm struggling with. It's just, maybe it's in the sense of like, you know, feeling it and knowing that, you know, like while you're not there in person, the connection is still there, because the word that me not being there physically doesn't make the words less true, you know? And so maybe still being able to understand that, you know, while we may not be in person, the words themselves and the feeling themselves and the emotions themselves behind it is still authentic, regardless of where we are in the world.
Thank you, Anaya. And I think we're going to end it here. And I just want to say thank you to all of the poets that came out. All of you had really incredibly inspiring poems and great deep answers. And thank you for submitting your poems to me and for finding the courage to share them.
Yeah, this has been an incredible program. Thank you all so much. It just magically worked out that it's 8:01 p.m. Eastern here, and it just worked out. Emily, I want to say a huge, huge thank you on behalf of everyone as that is part of Together We Remember, and then the extended community of folks that came together to do more Baltimore, the incredible work that you do, and all of our incredible poet, artists, activists, panelists. Y'all are incredible. Thank you for coming together across the country, uniting across lines of difference, transcending those lines, and bringing us together and showing that despite our physical separation because of the coronavirus, we can be more united than ever before, at least in spirit and in our art. So thank you. I'm going to go ahead and end the recording.